friends. I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I'm delighted today to introduce you to Dr. Ray Guarendi. He's a clinical psychologist and father of 10 adopted children who's written 17 books on adoption, family, being a faithful disciple, and marriage. Dr. Ray is also one of the most popular radio and television hosts in the Catholic media community. His call-in radio program, The Doctor Is In, has been on the air for the past 20 years and can be heard on 500 stations and Sirius XM channel 130. His TV show, Living Right with Dr. Ray, can be seen on EWTN Global Catholic Network and is aired in 140 countries. Dr. Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Well, Amy, actually, I only have an associate degree in geology, but I thought if I just put that, I probably wouldn't get on your show.
Oh, I don't know about that. You are very well known and very learned and famous. So we are just so happy to have you here. Tell us about your journey. You got started in psychology and you wrote your first parenting book when you were just 28 years old.
I was working at a mental health center. I became the go-to parenting guy. And what I found I was shocked by. Parents were second-guessing themselves, unsure of themselves, afraid of being psychologically incorrect, doing something that's going to land their kid on a Springer television show 15 years hence. I was shocked, Amy. So I wrote the book titled, You're a Better Parent Than You Think. Now, at that time, I had no writing experience. I had no articles. It must have touched a chord with the New York publisher because they contacted me and were interested in that book.
And then you did the circuit, right? Your popularity just blossomed from that.
I got a call from a very small local school district that said, we need a speaker. Now, at that time, Amy, I was working 12-hour shifts, seeing clients for 12 hours back to back. And I thought, I'll go do it. That's fine. I can get out of the mental health center, go do a talk. I used to entertain in nightclubs. So I thought I got bit, Amy. I got bit by the speaking bug. And from then on, it just gained momentum.
And you are so wonderful at it, but your content too. There are a lot of people that can speak, but don't really have anything of substance or value to say, but that is the exact opposite of you. You not only are a wonderful speaker and obviously and host, but your content is so important. Tell us a little bit more about what you were talking about the parents and just feeling like they didn't have, a handle on how to raise their kids, because that now translates into some of your marriage things as well.
Well, Amy, I'm just going to shut up and let you just keep going on with these accolades. Okay. A lot of bests, a lot of ESTs. You're being very complimentary. I appreciate that. It's going to hurt my humility because my humility is something I'm very proud of. So what happened? Well, it's only gotten worse since then, Amy. I see parents now who don't enjoy their kids, who are frustrated, who are afraid to be firm disciplinarians, who want to stop at 1.62 children because they thought they wanted 3 or 4, but they can't handle the 2 that they have. They have been inundated by the experts and all their psychologically correct theories, and we've trashed the wisdom of the ages. And my goal is to put parents back in charge in their own home. And there's another factor here, Amy, that's huge, and that is the culture is no longer on the side of faith-filled parents.
Yes, or on the side of marriage. And you started telling people that, and you were on Oprah, you were on Joan Rivers. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then how you transitioned to the Catholic media spot.
When I got called by Catholic media, I very enthusiastically said, no, not interested. Because at that time, I was speaking maybe 100, 120 times a year, and I didn't want to be tied to a microphone. My wife said, Ray, give it a chance. Now, prior to that, Amy, I was in secular media for 20 years. That's what I did. And for me to go into Catholic media, I thought, well, I can at least talk about God. I can talk about morals and virtue. Okay, I'll give it a try. 6 months, that's it. If it goes down in flames, I'm out of here. I was shocked, Amy. I was shocked by the people who said they've come back to the church, by people who said they've converted, by marriages that got better. And I remember thinking, even if I wanted to leave Catholic media, I would be nervous about telling God, well, you know, I kind of saw the effect that good Catholic media could have, but hey, I'm a busy guy. You know what I mean? I'm busy. I got places to go, people to see, really don't have time for that. So it's been a blessing I couldn't anticipate.
Well, I know we talked about, you said many of the callers kind of struggle with the same issues, maybe transitioning a little from parenting, of course, but also with their spouse. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing and, about the culture is kind of sweeping people and what you're hearing people say when they call in?
If it's regarding marriages, by and large, it's frustration with the other person. They're not changing and doing the things I would like them to do. Now, granted, a lot of those things can be frustrating. I had a lady call me up. She'd been married 52 years. Very, very upset. She said, I don't think my husband has ever apologized to me in 52 years. And I asked her, I said, does that still bother you? Oh, absolutely. Bothers me more every year. I said, why have you not gotten to the point where you recognize this is who he is? This is the way he is. And you're frustrating yourself over something that hasn't changed. And after 52 years, is probably not going to change. So you're still upsetting yourself. I'm working on a new book, and there's a phrase by the comedian George Carlin. He says, don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things. And in marriages, I have found that an awful lot of these tiny things. Now, a lot of people listening to you, Amy, and with the Marriage Initiative, they got decent marriages, but they have a lot of frustrations over the day-to-day quirks, habits, tiny little idiosyncrasies of their spouse. And they stay upset about them. They don't get over it and say, hey, I've got a wonderful spouse. I'm going to quit focusing on this particular idiosyncrasy that's driving me crazy. When I first got married, my wife would leave cupboard doors open. And I thought, I'm a neatnik. Now, God has a sense of humor, because you can't be a neatnik and have 10 kids. That's not going to happen. Your house smells like a swamp. There's no way. A little kid's idea of order is very different than my own. So I told my wife, I'm professionally trained, highly trained communicator. I told my wife, I said, honey, you're leaving doors open. Oh, okay, Ray. Okay. Well, obviously she forgot and the door stayed open. So one day I noticed that 7 of 12 doors were open. So I opened the other 5. I left all 12 of them open. So when she came into the kitchen, she went, oh. I said, you see, honey, you don't even realize what you do. It took me about a week to realize I was being, now this is a psychologically correct term here, Amy, so I'm trained to use this term.
We're prepared.
I was being a jerk, is what I was. I have this wonderful woman, and I'm getting bent over these cupboards. I just started shutting them. And when I finally shut my mouth about shutting cupboards, first of all, there wasn't any more friction over something this silly. And secondly, she started shutting them herself. She's even started shutting mine. So, and she doesn't say anything about it too. She's nicer that way than I am.
Oh, I know my husband has a little idiosyncrasy that I'm not going to out on, but yeah, over 28 years of marriage, I just
you're not still upsetting yourself over it, are you?
No, and that's the nice thing, is that when you kind of just give it away, it doesn't even bother you anymore. You just do that one little thing and it doesn't even make you upset, like you said.
You're smart.
Well, I get to interview a lot of people like you, so I get to learn some really good things. Tell me, one of the other things you said is that a lot of divorces, the problem in the culture is the people. It's not some of the big things, like you said. It's like they just really don't like each other anymore.
That's what it is. I think this isn't necessarily heavy pathology in majority of marriages. There's not abuse, there's not alcoholism, there's not inveterate gambling, there's not mental illness. The majority of the marriages are, we don't get along. And I oftentimes say to the folks when I'm getting really frustrated in marriage counseling, didn't you used to like each other once? What was it that attracted you to each other? Is it still there? Did it go away? Did it get buried beneath all of the irritations and the friction that have happened? And we live in a culture. You know what the divorce rate was in 1960, Amy?
What?
5%.
Wow.
2 generations ago, it was 5%. Now, human nature has not changed in 60 years.
Yeah.
Human nature is still human nature, but yet there was something about the culture that said you do not throw away this kind of commitment. And most people stuck with it, even though they may have been unhappy, because there was a wonderful survey done that found out on the edge of divorce, people who didn't get divorced 5 years later were asked, is it better or worse? The majority said it's better. Of the people who got divorced, 5 years later, they asked, are you happier now? The majority said no.
Yeah. That if only, I think that was such an important and valuable thing for you to tell our marriage champions, that if they can stick it out and if they can encourage others to stick it out, the circumstances will change. They can get some help. They can learn some skills, and they'll get through this and be happier later. So 5 years is not a lifetime. That's a doable, that's a window of hope that is doable.
If somebody comes into my office and wants to leave the marriage, say the guy, he's got 4 kids and he wants out, and he really has no moral compunction about getting out. His attitude is, I'm not religious. I want to do what I want. I met somebody that I think makes me much, much, much more content and happier. I'm tired of working on this. So what do? I can't appeal to his moral system. What I do, Amy, is I take him through the possible complications that he is now inviting. For example, I'll ask him, does your 14-year-old daughter think you're destroying the family? Oh, yeah, she won't even talk to me now. I see. Does your new girlfriend have a child? Well, she has 2. Well, how are they? Oh, they're brats. I try to correct them, but she won't let me. I see. Does your 6-year-old want to come over when they're there? No, not really. So what I do, I walk him through all the complications that he's inviting, and he has no idea they're coming. None. His attitude is, I'm just frustrated now. I want to stop the frustration, and I'll go over there because I'll be better.
That I'm so glad that you do that. And those are that's a key that our marriage champions can learn from you, to kind of paint that picture and help people see, what some of the choices and the ramifications would be. I know you have a specific book for marriages, The Simple Steps to a Stronger Marriage, which is a revived version of one of your previous books, the Marriage Small Steps, Big Rewards. Let's talk about that, because you have such practical things that you invite people to do that will make some big difference.
If a parent walks into my office and they're not at all enjoying their 5-year-old, and the reason is because the 5-year-old is being allowed to be a discipline problem. Notice I didn't say is a discipline problem. I said is being allowed to be a discipline problem. I'll give a couple of suggestions to get them started. Just a few basic things on reasserting their authority. About half of them come in 2 weeks later and say things like, I think I'm living with a different child. He's so much more pleasant. He's more affectionate. He's hugging me more. I call it the cascade effect. If you make a couple of small changes, it can reverberate far beyond anything you expected. So in the marriage book, I offer 10 small steps that I think if you do these things, you'll see improvement beyond the small steps. Now, here's the catch, Amy. There's something in psychology, in therapy, called resistance. Yes. That is, I can tell people what I think might be a good way for them to navigate life better. I can't convince them to do it if they don't want to be convinced. It's resistance. In the marriage book, I spend about 70% of the time trying to get people over their resistance to doing these tiny little things.
Yeah. And that is it's so much, so often, like you said, they've gotten to the point where they're irritated with each other. And then you suggest something and they don't want to do it.
They don't want to do it. I call that the ultimate resistance rationale at the very end of the book, because I go through what I call resistance rationales, how you basically say, well, if I did that, this is what would happen. Or if I did that, they'd take advantage of me. Or if I said that, they'd look at me like, are you crazy? In the end of the book, I say the ultimate resistance rationale. I don't want to. And that is the highest hurdle in getting folks to at least try a few simple things, give them a chance to reverberate.
How do you overcome that?
Well, if you can convince them, I'll ask them, I'll say, so do you like being this miserable? Is this the way you want to live? No. Well, what do you have to lose? The way you've been doing it obviously isn't working, because it's 22 years into your marriage and you're sitting in my office. So what would be the problem with trying this for 3 months? I suppose. One of the things I do, Amy, when they come into the office, I will ask them, I've learned to do this. Do you want to stay married? Now, that's the key question. Sometimes what happens is they hesitate. If there's hesitation on one or both,
Yeah.
I know I'm on uphill battle, because they see divorce as one of their options.
Yeah.
If they say, no, we cannot leave the marriage, we have children, we're not going to do that, they say, well, then good, because you will be willing to do some of the things we talk about, because the option, which is to split the marriage, is not there. Sometimes here's what happens. This is a tricky part of therapy. I've noticed this more and more as I've been older and doing more of this. Sometimes a spouse will come into therapy, marriage counseling, only to be able to say, I tried marriage counseling, it didn't work.
Yeah.
They had no intention of making it work, but they
Yeah.
wanted to be able to justify it.
Just say they tried.
I tried, yes. And
Wow.
those are things you learn after doing 40 years of therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. But they can't trick you.
They could when I was younger. I was coming out of graduate school, going to save the world. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to do what I can for who I can.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of those steps. You said, you talked about social entropy, about how we just get sloppy.
Yes. Most marriages, if they're on turf that's a little wobbly, it's not because there's hostility. It's not because there's animus. I just got lazy. I don't compliment you like I used to. I don't say please and thank you like I used to. I don't do little things like I used to when I was trying to win you over. Entropy is a physical law that says everything decays. The law of social entropy says the relationship decays. It isn't anything that is nasty. It's just, okay, we've been married 28 years. Hey, get me a cup of coffee, would you? There's no please. There's no thank you. There's no, boy, you look great today, honey. You look great today. It's not because I don't want to say it. It's because I don't think to say it. It's kind of like lifting weights. You got to put the effort into it to get good at it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of your steps, because I think that was a real reminder for our marriage champions, not only for those that they're working with, but for themselves too, to just remember those little things, like getting your spouse that cup of coffee. If you're the one who made it first, that means the world to me. Let me tell you, I'm not a morning person, and my husband brings me coffee every morning, and that means the world to me. I mean, that just starts everything off on the right foot.
One of my small steps is a counter to the law of social entropy. It's called make a list. I will tell the client, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a couple days, whatever time you need. I want you to write down everything you can think of positive about your spouse. It can be qualities, it can be attributes, it can be she makes great soup, It can be that her hair looks good in the evening after a whole day. Anything at all. And then you pick a time and you tell your spouse, there's something I want to tell you about. I want to sit down with you. Now, sometimes spouses are suspicious, like what it's about. You're gonna tell me what's wrong with me? No, I want you to hear this. I had a lady email me. She said, I did that exercise with my husband because we were really getting on each other's nerves. I did that. He didn't want to listen initially. He was suspicious. But I sat him down and I was surprised at how many things I could think up if I actually thought about it. And he was shocked that I recognized that. And she said, we talked for 4 hours and we went to church and we held hands. That little thing that he knew that I thought that about him. You know, there's a law in psychology that says we don't act because of what people think of us. We act because of what we think they think of us. So if I think you think I'm a nice person, whether I am or I'm not, I'm going to be more inclined to be nice around you because I think you think I'm nice. That's the point in marriage. If these make a list, I didn't know you thought that about me. So now I may try to live up to a little bit of it. If you say, you're so good with the kids, you're just so good with the kids, the way you hug them and kiss them as a daddy, you're very affectionate. Okay, well, I'm gonna make sure that you notice I do that a little bit, you know?
Yeah. That is, you live up to, you've cast the high view, you've cast an aspiration, and then people are like, oh yeah,
sure.
You noticed me do that, and I can do that. I love that. One of your other steps you talk about was being willing to apologize.
Say you're sorry. You know, it's interesting about sorry. Marriages get frustrated. I'm always the one who apologizes. She never apologizes. And I tell folks, the reason most people don't apologize is not because they think they're superior. It's because the apology means too much. It means I'm a loser. It means I'm admitting I'm 100% wrong. It means, well, you're right, like you always are right. So what happens is I don't look at an apology as I'm going to say I'm sorry for what I did to you at that moment in time. That's what it means. That's all it means. When it means more than that, I'm much less likely to say it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's an interesting thing that happens in human relationships, Amy. Most of the time, it is easier to talk nice than to do nice.
Yeah.
Hey, Amy, let's get together for lunch, okay? You and I'll give you a call. We'll get together for lunch. And so I see that you're calling me and I see on the caller ID, it's you. I'm like, I'm not going to pick it up today. It's easier to act like a nice guy than to talk like a nice guy than to act. Apologies are just the reverse. I was at a florist's and I thought, I'm going to get a rose for my wife. You know, I haven't gotten a rose since our wedding rehearsal dinner. Maybe I'll get her a rose. So the florist said, what did you do? I said, what do you mean, what did I do? She said, well, guys come in here. That's their way of apologizing. They hand a flower. They don't say it. They just hand a flower. I said, well, no. I said, my wife and I have a different understanding. That's not the way it's going to be. So I went home like a little kid. I had it behind my back. You know, when you're 6 years old and you go pick a bunch of stink weeds for your mom and you think it's the greatest thing in the world. And you go like this and you hold them out. So I held the rose out like that. Randy says, what did you do? I said, you ever work for a florist? So I always tell people, it's nice to act nice, but combine the two.
Yeah.
Say, I'm sorry. Here's the other thing that happens. I call it a personal apology percentage. What that is how wrong do you have to be in your mind now before you say, I'm sorry? Now, for most people, it's 50% or more.
Yeah.
But for a Christian, for somebody that wants to make a marriage be better, your percentage should be any percent. If you and I get into an argument, Amy, and you're badgering me, and I'm keeping my mouth shut, but you are just going on and on. And finally, I erupt. You know what? Your mother raised a witch who is a prima donna and a diva who thinks everything has to be done the way she wants it. Now, I'm wrong. I'm wrong for doing that. And I can justify it by saying, well, I wouldn't have done it if she wouldn't have badgered me for 17 minutes. Even if I was 7% wrong in my mind, I have to apologize for my 7%. I shouldn't have said that, Amy. I'm sorry. That was really wrong. I didn't mean it. I was frustrated. I'm sorry. Now, I always tell people, if you want more apologies, don't throw them back in your partner's face.
Yeah.
Don't say things like, well, sorry's just words. If you're truly sorry, you're going to change. I use this analogy. If you go to confession and you've been telling the priest the same sins for 20 years, how'd you like it if he said to you, you've been saying I'm sorry for this stuff for 20 years, and I don't notice a whole lot of change, so I'm not going to give you absolution. Wow. Because don't just say you're sorry and then not change. See, we don't want anybody doing that to us. But in a marriage, if my spouse has a particular habit that he or she apologizes for, and in my mind, you're not changing quick enough, I'm going to throw the apology back in your face.
Yeah.
That's just words. Don't say just words. Words don't make everything right. You can't just say, I'll be sorry, and then I'm going to go do it again. You do something like that, and you will crush the desire to give you an apology.
Yeah, that's a hard truth, but that's really important to think about that, and to think about how that, do you want the apology? Do you want to move forward, and taking ownership? Another thing you talked about was listening a minute.
People come into my office and the wife might say, I just wish he would stick up for me with his mother. I just think that most of the time when she says something, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't stick up for me. So I'll turn to the guy. Do you know why she thinks that? Not really. How long have you been married? 19 years. You don't know why she thinks that? Have you ever asked her? So one of the small steps is ask a question. I want to know why you think that. I want to know why you think I'm an inconsistent disciplinarian. I want to know why you think I'm thoughtless about calling you. I want to know specifics. I'm just asking. I'm not going to defend myself. I want to get inside your head.
Yeah.
I say in the book that more people want to be understood than agreed with. If my spouse knows that I understand her frustration with the kids, even though I think she gets too naggy with them, but I do understand her frustration, she's going to be less threatened and maybe a little more likely not to nag so much.
And with 10 kids, I would imagine there might be some.
Oh, no, we didn't let them in the house. No, you can't have a good marriage with 10 children there. We didn't let them in the house. Just a couple at a time, usually on Sundays. That's more what we did.
The garage. Had to be out in the garage.
By the way, can I brag? I really don't. I'm hesitant to brag, but okay, can I brag?
Please, of course.
Warms my heart. My son's parole officer said one of the nicest kids he has. When you hear something like that, you just feel good inside. The judge said some of the most mannerly kids in his courtroom.
Oh, well, there you go. And in fact, one of your latest books is the things that you learned parenting the 10 kids.
Yeah. I figure it this way, Amy. If you bat 300 lifetime average in baseball, that's Hall of Fame. You're going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So I got to have 3 of my 10 kids navigate life well. That's 300. I'm a Hall of Fame dad.
There you go. I think you've eased the pressure on a whole lot of us. That's wonderful. Oh, well, Dr. Ray, this has been so fun talking to you. You were just a pleasure
Thanks,
to
Amy.
visit with. And I know our marriage champions are going to enjoy this and that they'll find many resources at your website. Then they can find you and they can hear you every day on your radio show or on the TV. So thank you so much for being here.
You're easy to talk to, Amy. You're real easy. Plus, you're a mom. How many kids you got there, dear?
Your boys, then they're grown. They're in their 20s and they
In their
are
20s.
gainfully employed.
So this is exciting for you, which is to having been a mom all those years. You know, you probably look forward to root canals. You know, just for the peace and quiet.
It is, and they're good boys. So that's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to marriages and babies someday, grandkids sometime soon. So
well, as I tell moms, boys are generally simpler creatures. The world is our bathroom.
oh yes, how true that is. Oh, well, Dr. Guarendi, thank you, Dr. Ray. It's just so great to talk to you. And Marriage Champions, if you'd like to find out more, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org.